Kia ora mai tātou, nā mihi nui nāku ki a koutou katoa. E nā mana, e nā reo, e nā mata, e nā wako te motu. Nā ko mātua, nā kuia, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. He taku mihi e naine e roto e te reo Pākehā. I'm shit scared. Right, so, yes, we are all. And the reason for that is that I'm a teacher. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that term. That means something to me. It's not a profession, it's a calling. And for many people in the room, that's why we're here, because we're called innately to something profound. And so when something isn't right, we feel it very deeply. I'd like to start off by just reaffirming that there's nothing godly about me at all. Okay, I make mistakes, like we all do. If we're in unknown territory and we choose to move forward, we don't always get it right. Human beings are wonderful and also flawed, and any good system accommodates that and uses the richness of that to make progress. So oftentimes, I know when I've been to conferences and they've had people standing up giving edited versions of their views, I go away feeling pretty stink, because I think, well, there's no way that I'm ever like that. So you can walk away and go, this was all bollocks, if it doesn't mean anything to you. But if it does one thing, it might put its arm around your shoulder. Because I would argue that at the moment, one of the biggest damaging things that's occurring in education for teachers is professional loneliness. Is for people who think and act often find themselves in ideologically and physically very isolated environments. So that's why this talk is about beyond cynicism, because I think cynicism is the death of hope. I think when we reach an institutional stage, when people just sit back compliantly and use their energy to become cynical, they actually become agents to the preservation of that state. It's when we exercise hope, when we exercise risk, when we exercise care, and when we disobey positively because our professional radar tells us that something is wrong, then we act like professionals. And that's why I think that positive disobedience is the mark of professionalism. And it's also the exercising of agency, that as a professional, we're not prepared to say, look, you may be making policy, but I'm highly educated and I'm deeply committed and I know that this is wrong. And so I'm not going to sit back passively. On an individual level and on a collective level, both levels, I refuse to sit back. I do something about it. When I wrote this book, it took 40 years to do, really. I'm 62 now. I started teaching when I was 19. I got expelled from secondary school. I got tossed out of teachers' college. I've been before boards of trustees, but I don't give up if I think something's wrong. And I know there are people in this room like that. You know, they fight because in front of them, they see the intellectual health of our nation and the social health and the cultural health. And we make a commitment to that. I thought when I wrote this, no other publisher wanted it except Pearson certainly didn't. What a surprise. Anyway, except Auckland University Press says, we don't know where this fits, but we'll give it a go. It's now in its 5th reprint since April, you know, and I'm in a state of terror in case somebody finds out that I really am just a Pukeatua farmer's boy, you know. But this is what's sat at the core of it. I worry deeply about my colleagues who leave this profession because they are micromanaged and undertrusted. The thing that brought them into this profession is something that gets strangled or suffocated. We need you. We need you here. We need you for the health of our nation, but we also need you because we face very difficult issues around anxiety, around depression, and we go, well, just teach kids to handle examinations with more care. And you go, that's not the issue. That is not the issue. There is something much more profound here. So what I've become interested in is, what does the post-neoliberal look like? After we've all seen that this has been a slow train wreck, what happens and who recovers this? That's us. That's us. And we do it at the micro level and we do it at the macro level. So this is what the problem is I think we face. There's a fundamental issue sitting at the bottom, is that we have mixed up the measure of learning with the measure of performance. They're not the same thing. Learning is a very complex and messy process made up of a wide neurodiversity. The interesting thing about our profession is, unlike any other profession, we actually see collectively the whole scope of a New Zealand population. They pass through our hands. Not just those who are crook, not just those who need a particular agency, they all pass through us. So collectively, we have a very, very profound finger on the pulse of the health of our country. Now, the difficulty is that when you turn something into an imagined measuring, instead of the child at the centre, we put an imagined criteria and imagined standards. We make a shift from what we had in the 1940s when we were a world leader, not world class. We were a world leader in education. Countries flocked to come here to try and understand what it was when, under the Fraser and Beebe and then the profound educators who took that forward, many of them just in their classroom, understood that we put a person into an education system to help them realize their unique potential. Not mapped against somebody else, not mapped against an imagined standard, not mapped against some generated criteria that has them trading inside the experience of what's already known. We had something very different. It wasn't broken. It was ripe for growth, but it wasn't broken. So one of the things that's elevated now is the idea that sits under the radar, is that we use testing to measure accountability. So this is why we don't have a lot of diagnostic testing in our toolkits. We have comparative testing, comparative against others or comparative against criteria. So both of those things removes the individual unique student from the center of things. It puts other things there. And so what we do to feed that is we don't use description, which is how we normally teach. If someone says, "How's Kerry doing in your class?" you can describe that in multiple levels. But what we do is we replace it with a symbolic gesture, a substitute that is essentially a mark or a grade or a two-word description, excellence, merit, whatever. We replace the richness of what we know with something dumbed down. So I kind of give a lot of thought to this because I've got a very cool job. I love my job. And I get to work with people who are doing their PhDs, who often have extraordinary intellects, and you grew them. You grew them. But they have, I love the word extraordinary, extraordinary intellects. So they're often very, very unusual thinkers. And when they talk about their time at school, one of the things they talk about is that they came to believe in many cases that they were not bright, that they were not good because they were not formula-based people. They didn't read strategies well. They tended to read beyond that. And so when we have a look at the idea of the formal testing that we still allow to happen in schools, where we put people in a room and set a clock ticking and then ask them to answer 50 questions, you get theorists like William Myers who says things like this. He says, these kind of tests can't measure initiative, creativity, imagination, conceptual thinking, curiosity, effort, irony, judgment, commitment, nuance, goodwill, ethical reflection, or a host of other valuable attributes. What do they measure, these great gods that we have operating in our schools? Well, what they can measure and count is isolated skills, some specific facts and function, content and some content knowledge, the least profound. The most shallow of attributes that we're trying to grow in education. So we have a situation where we are facing the fallout now of a system that is over-tested, and it's got some really profound issues behind it. The first one is that we get people with an illusion of success. We have this preoccupation with success that's done a lot of damage, because success is an artificial construct. You know, we have moments of success and failure. That's what being a human being is. That's what thought is, because we discover with thought. So you don't get it right all the time. One of the difficulties with this is that we get students through into universities who have been so poisoned by success, they have this belief that their articulate nature and their ability to understand strategy equates with intelligence. It's not the same thing. Oftentimes, there are students who come in who actually may not be terribly articulate. They may not be great at formulas, but they are profound thinkers. Profound thinkers. And they're there because people like you, individual teachers, have seen it in the face of this other system that places so much emphasis on criteria. And you've put an arm around their shoulder and spoken into their heart. And that's why they come through. And they're the people who do well. They're the ones who don't start crumbling at the second year in their degree. The second issue is this. Most of the testing that, if we're trying to look after the health of somebody, basically what we want to be able to do is diagnose, is to understand how they think. That's probably our most useful tool. But in fact, if you have a look at the amount of testing that we do and the nature of the testing we do at secondary school, very little of it is truly diagnostic. It's comparative. You imagine an education system where someone said to you, well, maybe we'll only have one comparative assessment thing in there, one major one, but we will equip you with lots of diagnostic tools so you can try and understand and work with and then expand the thinkers who are in your care. That is not a description of the New Zealand education system. It's not, but it is a description of our need. And it is a description of the needs of students, and it's a description of the need of the health of a nation. The other one is this, is that what happens is that we generate by the system of testing and marking a very high level of dependency, because students come to us and they go, how did I do? Oh shit, that is not good. A healthy education system would have somebody going, I can tell you how I can tell you how I'm doing. I can tell you how I think. I can tell you, let me show you. I'm just going to ask you 4 questions. Now, you've been inside this education for a long time system. You have a look at these questions for yourself. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to stand up and mime or anything. Just ask this. So these are questions from somebody who knows how they learn. Do you know what causes you to retain certain information and not others? Do you know how you increase your chances of discovery when you learn? Do you know your most effective strategies for recovering from failure? Do you know how you push yourself beyond competence? And if you didn't learn that in school, why not? What's wrong with an education system where fundamental things, where people who are in the tractor seat of their own learning cannot answer those questions? They have to wait for years afterwards, and then still we find them difficult. So, oops, press the right button. One of the difficulties that this testing has raised, and I've heard it alluded to a little bit before, is corruption. And there's a thing called Campbell's law, and this is a difficult thing because it places us in an ethically very conflicted situation in schools, where we know that if the students get marks, they might get choices, and we care for them. And we care for our institutions, and we care for ourselves. The difficulty is that Campbell's law says that if you fund performance in a service organisation like health or education, you will get corruption. In education, it occurs where people massage people away from sitting exams because it will damage their grade point average. It's in consciously and deliberately trying to skew data by training kids in exam behaviours. It's in individual teachers who have control over classing, filling up their classes with students who perform well, and so that they continue to appear to be excellent teachers when it's masking the fact that, in fact, there may be a teacher who got a very different demographic in their class who did something really profound. This is the day-to-day pulse of our lives. But it's all about skewing data. It's all about being corrupt. But we're very uneasy about talking about it. It exists. And it grows, the more you start tying funding to performance, it goes haywire. So when Diane Ravitch wrote The Death and Life of the Great American School System, she was the darling of the Bush and Clinton administration. She wheeled in charter schools, she wheeled in performance pay, and then saw what it did. She's a beautiful scholar, she's very readable, but she had a road to Damascus meltdown when she saw the level of corruption that was going on in schools by principals to make sure that they looked good because they were going to get rewards for it financially. And the victims of this were kids. They were kids who thought in different ways, kids who didn't perform. They may have thought, but they didn't perform well. So I've started giving a bit of thought to, well, who pays the price for this? Well, in my job, I've seen four kinds of people who pay a price for this. These are people who don't perform well, but have extraordinary intellects. The first one, you might call a reflective thinker. This is the kind of person, and this is Paul. He's the kind of person that when you are talking with him, he says, give me a night to have a think about this, I'll come back to you tomorrow. It's because he reflects deeply, and he looks at things from a multiple variation of perspectives. He turns it over and over. He needs time. When you put him in a room with a clock ticking and 50 questions, he's not a pub quiz junkie. He's not a mastermind seat warmer. A very different kind of person. Brilliant intelligence. The person who will come back the next day or 2 or 3 days later with astounding insights does badly. Yet he designed this. It's a wheelchair that takes you upstairs. This is the kind of intelligence that we invest in but end up punishing, because the unique nature of this thinking doesn't fit with a system that uses a rude and blunt measure. Another person, this is Talita, who's one of my PhD students, just recently graduated, the first Tongan woman graphic designer in the world to have done a PhD. Beautiful thinker, crashed at school constantly because she was a finely tuned thinker, and she would get panic attacks when people lifted the anxiety up around the questioning. They decontextualized it from the living environment, put it in an artificial environment, and then lift the stress. So when you said to her, what's 7 times 8 plus 4 minus 3? She'd go, oh, shit. Of course, she totally knew that. She knew a world beyond that. But she was measured by that blunt rule. She staggered into university on a certificate and made her way through and walked out with a PhD that changed the world. Sorry. Okay. So Gudrun, this is the heuristic thinker. This is the thinker who best, some of you may be this, you don't do your best teaching by working with criteria and inside somebody else's framework. The current theory talks about the power of play in highly intelligent thinking. You're someone who plays with ideas. You read situations on your feet, and you play with them. So this is the kind of guy, this is Gudrun, who's just developed a system of software that we can take the first sound that your baby makes and turn it into a physical ring. This is a ring of the sounds of his day. So he develops software that starts from sleeping, getting up in the morning, etc. So he develops the software to make sound physical. This guy works in the abstract. He works entirely in the abstract. And if you try and put criteria around him, he turns out rubbish. If you take it away from him, he creates wonders. You know, we need these thinkers. But more than that, we need to make sure that people who have elements of this kind of thinking, it's appreciated in a healthy education system. And this is the last one. And this is a very common one. This is the victim of success. So this is the student who believes that they are really successful because they can count their grade point average. And the difficulty is that they have been massaged they've been massaged into risk aversion. They've learnt the formulas, they've learnt what's required, they ask to see exemplars, they want to know the learning criteria, and then they perform. But they can't think in unstable ground. So they do everything in their power to make the ground stable again, including disparagement. So what happens is when we actually have to break ground with thinking, they don't know how to fail and recover. They don't know how to fail and recover because an education system has been predicated on keeping them safe so they keep performing well inside it. I'm just skipping through these reasonably quickly because I realize the clock's ticking. Right. So here's the situation I think we've ended up in schools at the moment. First of all, we have two amazing resources in schools. We have educators and we have kids. And I'm not being euphoric. I have deep, deep respect for both groups. But I don't think we've got a system that works well to grow the high level of innovation that we need in this country. And what's happened is that we've micromanaged into mediocrity. We've micromanaged talent into mediocrity. We've grown risk aversion, and that's why we do things like we ask you to nominate what your outcomes will be and then report on them. Whether this is performance reviews, whether it's assessment criteria, we dumb down the blue sky and turn it to a veneer just above your heads, and then we all perform adequately within it. We have one of the most low-trust professions in the world. One of the most low-trust. We think that teachers are going to be naughty unless you control them and measure them. We don't trust them, so we hold them accountable to performances. For God's sake, wake up. For heaven's sake, look around you. Look back in your schools. Look at the collective intellect. It's not the way you manage professionals. We've done that through assessment criteria, but what the other difficult thing is that what elevates in the system are not innovative thinkers, but people who can report well. They're the people who do well. So they learn strategically to account and report. What the hell are we doing? So, and this is the problem. We have a myth in New Zealand about a number 8 wire mentality. We go, oh, but we're innately creative. It is not a cultural attribute. Creativity is something that was grown in New Zealand because of an education system from the 40s forward that placed a huge amount of emphasis in flexibility and diversity. That's why it happened. At the moment, we have students coming in, like I said, they are asking us for the criteria. They're doing it to you right now, I'm sure. In your classroom, they're going to measure what's valuable by what's going to be in an imagined test. Not in the innate and inherent nature of the learning, but what will be measured. We are a small country at the bottom of the Pacific. To do well in the world, we cannot replicate, we have to lead. We have to lead. We have to be able to develop ideas, commodities, services that can niche place themselves in somewhere else where someone who's better resourced with availability, with transport, with bigger economies that they can't do. So if we don't do that, we face becoming a sweat house, a conformist sweat house that doesn't do very well. And so I think about this. Alan Fletcher says basically that he talks about this as creativity, but I just think it's actually just growing knowledge well. He said it will only work well in a system where we encourage people and have a system set up to help us trade beyond experience. Not trade within experience, not trade within a criteria, but have the courage to go, there is the unknown that you are capable of producing, and it is my job to have your back, explain the system, and help you get to that. So you can perform wonders beyond my limitations, beyond the limitations of the known, and thereby the description for that is that you innovate. So I'm going to jump this because I think time's running out. So I just jump through to, well, no, bugger it. All right. Sorry. Okay. I have a major problem at the moment that people think a solution to this is to advance technology in education and fund it. I have a problem with that. Okay, the reason for that is that technology too often imbue technology with the grace of social change. It doesn't have it. It's only human beings who have that. If you want to grow an education system that's rich and productive, you have to invest in human beings. So, to give an example, Tom Standish talks about a thing called chronocentricity. It basically says this, to give you a couple of examples. When the telegraph first arrived, and then when public transport on aeroplanes arrived, both technologies were imbued with the idea that they were going to bring world peace. We're going to get world peace because we'd be able to go and visit people in Chicago or Afghanistan. It was all going to be lovely. Technology was going to save us. Within a decade, we were dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay. The telegraph, we were going to be able to contact people and talk to them. It was all going to be lovely. That's what cybercrime, the whakapapa of cybercrime goes back to there. And cyberbullying goes back to... The technology is not at fault. It's how human beings use it. If you want to grow education, if you want to grow a healthy society, you understand that technology changes and you invest in the critical capacity of human beings. It's a logical thing. Those of you who had RSI, because when you first came onto the computer and got the mouse and went, yeah, we didn't have critical facility for understanding that there might be physical damage beyond the euphoria. It's a simple thing. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And if you look at it enough, you will see it turning the same things over and over. It's our job as critical thinkers to be aware of that and to push the importance of the change. So what am I working with? Well, I'm going to jump this because I was going to talk to you a lot about hierarchies, but we don't have a lot of time for a hierarchy. So, no, because I want to get to something really important. What can I do? What can I do? So we go away from here and we go back into schools and we go back into classrooms where we often feel alienated and lonely. And we feel disobedient, and we think that because we might not look like a team player, that our disobedience is somehow unprofessional, when it's not. And so one of the pieces of research I do is what's the nature of organizations that actually attract and keep innovative people, whether that's in education or in medicine or in a corporation. What is the nature of them? So there's some interesting stuff about why some people who are highly innovative can survive in adverse conditions. There's a couple of basic principles. The first one is don't become isolated. Care for thinkers like you. Find them in your environment. And if you can't find them in your physical environment, find them in some online. Teachers do this as a survival strategy all the time. They set up communities of thinkers. And oftentimes when you're working in an organization that has become relatively toxic, it is the only way that you stop yourself being picked off because your spirit dies. The second point is this. Refuse. Absolutely refuse to relinquish agency. Refuse to become passive. Refuse not to question. Because when you demonstrate that, you give permission to other people to demonstrate it. They may not have the strength that you have. But if you don't do it, and this is where I've heard the thing come through 3 times already today, we understand this innately, but it actually works at the micro level too. Second, the next one, okay, that book originally was called Virus, but my publishers said don't call it that because it's not going to do very well if you... But the reason it was called Virus is this is what I've come to understand. When I got tired of hitting a concrete wall, I became sneaky. Okay, so we know this, come on. You close the door on your classroom and you do something you're not supposed to be doing because you know it's right. Okay, that's viral. That's viral. It is positively infecting something that is not well with something better. And we do it all the time. The power of viruses is that they actually spread. And certainly my greatest innovations came from watching other people who behave virally. And the last point is this. There's a word we toss around a lot called enthusiasm. And you know, its origin doesn't mean what we think it does today. It's actually about you. It comes from 2 Greek words, en theos. It means inner God. It is the fire inside you that continues to burn in adversity. It is a very, very precious thing because it is the origin and sustaining nature of power. It's the nature of you and your ability to change. If it starts to die and you don't resource it, or if it starts, you've seen it in kids. If we see it start to die in kids, we know the recovery is going to be difficult. When we come to conferences, when we meet with other people, when we talk and share ideas, that is like pouring kerosene on it. It's an active thing we do to sustain something that is actually the origin of change and coping. Thank you.